Well, inflammation is sometimes difficult to explain. It's something that we all have experienced, from an infected wound to a sprained ankle to, just aches and pains from overuse of our joints. But inflammation generalized, we call the silent killer because systemic inflammation in the cardiovascular system, in your lungs, in your internal organs, God forbid, in your brain. These are things that we don't want to experience, and that unfortunately, as we age, it's linked to hormone decline. And so as our hormone levels decline with age, starting as young as age 30, 1 to 3% a year for pretty much everyone, testosterone is very intimately linked to inflammation. And so as we see small declines in testosterone over time, we see reciprocal changes in inflammation levels. We measure things with blood tests, obviously, as we're looking at biomarkers as we start working with new clients. But C-reactive protein in the blood, general inflammation, CRP, cardio is a measure of cardiac inflammation, homocysteine levels, that's an inflammatory protein in our bodies that we suppress with B vitamins and folic acid. So we know that we can suppress inflammation by doing hormone replacement. One of the reasons that we see decreased risk of heart attack and stroke in aging patients taking hormone therapy is because there's less inflammation. And so, inflammation is a very negative factor of aging, something that we deal with every day, whether we pay attention to it or not. What do we do about inflammation? Well, obviously, if it's an acute injury, you're going to use ice and maybe an anti-inflammatory. Or if you have subtle inflammation and it happens to bother you in your knee, hip, or shoulder, you're going to try some kind of a medical intervention to help decrease inflammation. But I think what is overlooked drastically and dramatically by most of us is, all right, what is our diet doing to us on an everyday, regular basis? What kind of foods are we putting in our body? What's in the foods that we eat? There are tremendous numbers of chemicals, of herbicides sprayed on fields of your blueberries and raspberries that you add to your yogurt, of the inflammatory compounds like gluten in wheat. We do a lot of testing for reactivity to certain foods in our diet, looking at leaky gut syndrome, results of chronic inflammation, and of certain gram-negative bacteria that can widen the membranes in the gut lining and cause, quote, what we call leaky gut syndrome that we treat with different supplements. But the simplest thing immediately is for people to do their very best to clean up our diet, stop eating processed foods with chemicals, preservatives. If it can stay on the shelf for a month, that may not be the best for you. And so, we joke about it, but really it is something that you should really stress to make a search in your life to look for trying to combat inflammation, one, with your diet, two, with things as simple as trying to alkalinize the water we drink. You would think that our water supplies in some areas, fortunately for us in Aspen, Colorado, we have a great water supply, and it is, very safe and healthy. But I won't even go down the road right now of fluoridated water and compounds that are used to just help, if you will, sterilize the water in public water systems. It is not always the best. And so you should be filtering your water. Something that I think is very important, that I'm currently not only investigating, but about to make a major purchase, is in a system to alkalinize my water. And I won't go into the companies that do that. There are several that have devices that you can use at home to create alkaline water. Their smart water, one of the other waters you can buy, they actually rated very poorly. They're not worth, the extra dollars you spend on them over, other brands of commercial water. Really, anything that comes in a bottle full of BPA, estrogenic compounds, and plastics, with microplastics being a huge cause of inflammation and chronic health issues in people, is not our best choice. We have to hydrate, but unfortunately, with mass marketing, grabbing a water bottle real quick at a convenience store seems a good thing to do. But when that bottle, if it sits in your car in the summer and is heated, those microplastics leach into the water and are in your system forever. So there are a lot of factors involved with creating inflammation. What can we do to combat it? First, starting with our diet. Secondly, changing water sources. Thirdly, using different supplements to help fight the inflammatory markers that have increased in our bodies over time. So you might ask, well, how do I fight that? What do you use? Well, peptides are a big rage right now. They're small chain amino acids that we use for various, very specific reasons. There's no one peptide for everybody. They're all very specific. We use peptides to boost immune function. We use peptides to decrease systemic inflammation. We use peptides to improve human growth hormone levels. There are just a long list of different peptides that we have available. But between that and really the most significant thing as we age, after you've already been hopefully working on starting at a young age, eating healthy, eating clean, getting toxins out of your life, balancing hormones, and years in women, many years, 10 to 20 years before menopause, we could see loss of adequate or optimal testosterone levels. Certainly with men, it's almost epidemic due to all the compounds that bombard us daily. So there are a number of treatments available, and something that you should just really have a high index of suspicion, so to speak. Am I doing the best things that I can to eliminate inflammation in my body, to help me live better longer? Obviously, inflammation is, as I said before, the silent killer, because it just creates an environment. I always tell people when they come in concerned about their cholesterol, I'm like, well, cholesterol alone is not going to kill you. You need cholesterol to make sex hormones. You need it for brain health, heart health. What causes plaque formation? Why do some of us have a heart attack and plugged up coronary arteries younger than others? Well, inflammation. How much glycation, how much sugar coating of your proteins do you have? Do you eat a lot of sugary foods and have a high carb diet? That is definitely not conducive for lowering inflammation. It may increase inflammation. And as our proteins get glycan or glycanated, so to speak, and become glycoproteins and sticky, if you will, and you have more fat molecules in your bloodstream and arteries that have suffered inflammation, that triggers plaque formation. And so it's a deadly combination, but something that really can be easily addressed and treated. And the earlier you start, the better. So I would encourage you to implement a number of these methodologies, if you will. Seek out someone that you can talk to, get some decent information. Do a Google search of companies that make machines that you can buy at home to help alkalinize your drinking water, purify and alkalinize your drinking water. And so with that, I wish you the best. For more information, you can click on the link below, visit our website, schedule a consultation if you like, and we will help you to do your best to live better longer.